Good morning and welcome to the Capital Metals PLC discussion and Q&A session. Throughout the recorded meeting, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all the questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Greg Martis, Executive Chairman. Good morning to you, sir.
Thank you, Alessandro, and thank you for everyone attending. I'm just going to give a brief intro, as Alessandro said, into the company and the recent situations, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So the presentation hasn't been updated really since the last session we did, so we thought this was probably the most appropriate format. I'm sure plenty of you have got plenty of questions. I've seen quite a few already, so thank you for those. So yeah, Capital Metals, we've got the Eastern Minerals project in the easternmost part of Sri Lanka, running about 60 kilometres north-south, and at the moment it's the highest grade undeveloped project in the mineral sands project in the world. In fact, probably the highest developed or undeveloped mineral sands project in the world. So since our last session, we were advised that we were going down the path of finding a partner to fund us into production in exchange for 50% interest in the project. So we were prepared to give away 50% to get it funded. And we ended up choosing Sheffield, who actually put in, I think also since our last session here, put in £1.25 million at just under 4p for a 10% interest in the company. They also have options to go to 14% at a substantial premium to that. And then, so we basically got all the way to the end of the documents. The documents were as good as done. Their due diligence was done. They said they had no material issues. And just as we were in closing phase, there's literally in a period of a couple of weeks, their share price went down 40, nearly 50%. And they have recently commissioned the Thunderbird project in Australia for 484 million Australian dollars. So, hats off to them. Did a great job with that. But we all know that, in the first few months of operations, you can have some teething issues. So they seem to be getting through it, but they've just had a bit of a tightening on their cash flow. And they had to announce last week that they were putting in another 7.5 million for their 50% interest, and that they had to preserve their cash and not use it to go down expansion avenues. So as Bruce Griffin, their executive chairman, said to me, that it was not about us, it was all about them. That doesn't necessarily help. We were on a path and we had built up expectations that that's the way we were going to go. So yes, it was disappointing, no question. When you go down those, we spent a long time on it, long time on the due diligence, long time on the documentation. But the more and more I was going through that process, obviously the more I learnt about different avenues of financing and also about the project itself. I've only been the executive chairman for the last 18 months, just under. And I was questioning, do I really need to give away 50% to get this thing into production? And I'm not saying that I would, in hindsight, would not have done the Sheffield deal. I think you'd still do it, and I still would have signed it. So yes, there is regret, but I'm completely confident that the project justifies us doing it ourselves. And to that end, you would have seen yesterday that we announced the appointment of a new COO in Stuart Forrester. And Stuart's background is Rio Tinto, Iluka, Southern Ionics, Chemours in the US. So a very highly qualified engineer, operations guy, processing guy, and a really good team builder from what I have seen. So we appointed him as our COO. And I think, hats off to us and hats off to our asset. We were talking to him about being the guy that would run the joint venture with Sheffield. And even though Sheffield are no longer at the table, or the status is postponed, but we are considering it no longer at the table, Stuart has said he is prepared to join us as our COO. So we're really happy to be able to announce that. He is just coming back from holidays. He'll start in the next couple of weeks. spend 3 weeks over here, really getting to the bottom of the resource, and then at the end, and I'll be here with him. I'm in Colombo at the moment, and at the end of that period, we will then go and sit down with the likes of Mineral Technologies, IEHC, anyone else is relevant who provide equipment to get our project into production on a vendor finance basis. We'll also be talking to off-takers to really minimise the amount of capex that we need to get into that first stage of production. So we're still going ahead on the staged approach. We had always looked at a staged approach for the project. 4 stages. The first stage was getting to 550,000 tonnes of heavy mineral concentrate. That's actually the most simple part of the process. So it's basically gravity process, a wet plant and washing, cleaning and screening beforehand. So not rocket science. So we're extremely confident we can do that ourselves and not give up 50% of the project. So that's where we're at now. The drilling program, a few people have asked, what are the delays in the commencement of the drilling program? It's pretty much Sri Lankan red tape. I was sitting with the chairman just earlier, chairman of the GSMB, which is their mines department, today, just prior to this meeting, and he assured me that we will get the last piece of paper that we need, and so we are ready to embark on that drilling program. So why are we doing the drilling program? Some people might ask. This asset absolutely justifies it. So the resource that we have, 17.2 million tonnes at 17.6% grade of heavy minerals. The 17 million tonnes is pretty small on a global standard, but we've always known that it had the capacity to double and probably triple and even more over the project life. But we haven't had the money to be able to do the exploration program. And we were ready to go. We had the program designed, and so we're still ready to push the button on that. So, why is it justified? That resource from 2016 is based on a hand auger program of about 1,600 holes for about 2,300 metres of drilling, and that that gave us a resource of 17 million tonnes. So you can see that you don't need to do a hell of a lot of drilling to get a resource. But that average depth is only 1.6 metres, and that's because the hand auger struggles to go below the water table. So we will be drilling to the basement, assuming we can reach it. So an air core sonic rig should easily get to we think the average basement will be around 10 metres. Obviously, that'll vary from the beach heading inland. And so there's a huge potential upside by being able to drill underneath that groundwater table, and laterally further inland as well. Some of the dunes have been tested, and some other areas we're pretty confident we'll be able to add to it. So, we've already got a 10-year project life, so people will say, well, why do you need to go and do that? Well, you always want to extend your project life in mineral sands. 10 years is actually a reasonably short life in mineral sands. And we, of course, the big thing is we want to increase the NPV. So ultimately, that's going to make us more attractive to other players in the mineral sand space. So what am I saying is the strategy now? It is we are absolutely going it alone. We are building the team. We are going out looking at a finance process to minimise the capex that we're required to get into cash flow that will get us to a positive cash flow basis. In the meantime, I'm hoping that we can at least double the resource, and that probably won't double the mine life, but you will be able to increase the capacity and increase the NPV. So, and of course, if there are other players, and we've spoken to a number of players in the industry, and I'm actually, I've had approaches since the Sheffield announcement was made, but I'm not jumping into those. They would need to be incredibly compelling. They need to show that they are way better than a go it alone return to all shareholders, and I need to know that they are certain before I start trumpeting them. So. My background is 30 years of resources M&A, and I think, as I said to Matt Gordon last night, in M&A, particularly listed M&A, you need to have a plan B, a plan C, and even a plan D. Sheffield was our plan B, and we're now on to the plan of going it alone. But if somebody wants to come and put an attractive proposal on the table, then that's fine. In the meantime, we are going to make ourselves more attractive to other parties. And with that, Alessandro, I think you were going to step in and introduce people for Q&A.
Yeah, perfect, Greg. Thanks very much for the update. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Greg takes a few moments to review the questions that have been submitted today, I'd like to remind you that the recording of this presentation, along with the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. As you can see, we have received a number of questions, Greg. If I could just hand back to you to read out those questions and give responses where it is appropriate to do so, I'll pick up from you at the end.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've answered a few of them in the talk already, but so the first question was that we originally indicated in March that we were getting ready for the drilling program and we're hoping to start in April. The reality is we just haven't got that final approval. That's life often in developing countries. It's life in developed countries. Getting approvals is never as fast as what you'd like, but I've got complete confidence from the chairman today that we would get that approval, hopefully this week. How likely is it that Sheffield Resources will come back to the table once Thunderbird is running more smoothly, and do you still trust them if they did? Sheffield are still at the table. Bruce Griffin is a director on our board, and Bruce and I get on very well. I understood his predicament. His share price dropped to a point where his market cap was under $80 million. The implied value of our deal was above that, well above that. And so I could see why he struggled to, with that sort of share price drop, to go in and raise money that he needed, because everyone was saying, well, how are you going to fund Capital Metals project? And at the same time, you've got to make sure that yours is right. So, look, I think Bruce has said the right thing. He said, look, let's postpone it now. But we still are very much interested. But don't assume that it'll be in the near term. So, and as you've heard, I'm not assuming that anybody's going to be there in the near term. And we're all about making ourselves more rock solid and do it on the go it alone approach, and only be convinced otherwise if it's incredibly compelling. So assuming we aren't waiting on Sheffield to change their mind, and with LB out of the picture currently, are there any other potential investors you have in mind from previous contacts? I think I've said yes. There's a number, but again, I'm keeping them at a distance. LB, we still talk to them, and I think I'm quite interested to talk to them about offtake. So and maybe have to give them some exclusivity over a certain amount of tons. But we're still sort of sorting out what we have to do best for our shareholders, so I haven't raced into that just yet. When do you anticipate the drilling will commence? I think I've said that. How are current lab result timings looking at the moment? Very good question. It seems to vary, but it can be sort of 3 to 6 months. But I think what we'll get with forgive me for looking aside. I've got questions on a laptop and I'm doing this on my iPhone. There'll be a lot of visual results that we'll be able to report, and we obviously know the resource already pretty well, so I think it'll be highly indicative. But yes, the lab, the assays can take some time. Another question about drilling and targets, which I've answered. All things being well, when would you expect to get into first production? So I think another good thing about this is Bruce Sheffield needed to do a pre-feasibility study, and because as an ASX listed company, you couldn't report an NPV without a PFS, whereas as for AIM company we can. So that wasn't a driver for us, but obviously there's a number of studies that we still need to do before we get to final investment decision. I'm still hopeful that we could get to that point in end of March next year. Might be a bit tight, but certainly in the first half. And with the scaled down approach and the speedier approach to production, I think it'll certainly be under a year for construction. So I think you can, safely assume that first half of 2026. So I think I said that before. That was our timeline. Sheffield's would probably stretch out 6 months beyond that. So hopefully we can be faster than what we might have been with Sheffield. Will Bruce remain on the board? Absolutely. His credentials in the space are second to none. And as I said, I completely understood why he had to make the decision. I didn't like it. It hurt, but yeah, I respect him, and we work very well together. So no, I've got no issue with that. And look, I know they really want it, and I think his strategy is to not be a single asset company. As you can see, he's ventured into Brazil, he's ventured into Sri Lanka, outside of Australia, and he wants to grow a business. It may be that he might miss the boat on being able to fund our project, but that doesn't mean that he's already got 10%, maybe 15% if he takes the warrant. So who knows what he does with it. With that, but he's certainly got to step up ahead of other parties. I'm more concerned about LB Group falling through and the required new capex costs. What info can you give about LB Group not proceeding? Was it commodity price based? It's a very good question. In the end, I lost confidence that they were going to be able to complete a transaction, and I couldn't tell you exactly why. And that's what was really bothering me. And so that's why we had to jump to the plan B. And it was, Bruce was way more transparent and way easier to deal with sort of towards the end of last year and the first quarter of this year. So door's still open. I know LB had some of their own issues, but I never got complete clarity. But I did not have enough confidence that I wanted to take them to the line. Look, we're sending the assays to South Africa. The actual laboratory, I'm not sure of the name of, but I can get back to people on that. Just somebody's clarifying on production. Rich, 2026 for production, 2025 for the final investment decision. So first half of next year, final investment decision, first half of 2026 for production. Apologies if I confused anybody with that. What is the anticipated duration timescale of the drilling program and formally adjusting the resource NPV? Good question. Look, initially, it is, so the budget, I think I mentioned yesterday to Matt Gordon, was under 200,000. That's our initial budget. And we're very confident that's going to add a lot. I doubt that it's going to hit our target of a double of the resource, but I think it will provide a very clear path as to how we get there. So therefore, we might need to add some more drilling to get there. I can't answer exactly what it is, right? It's the mystery of what's in the ground. We will be looking to formally adapt the resource and the NPV as soon as it's material enough to do so. So there could be, I think it's, certainly could be within 6 months, but I think people will get a good feel for it well before that. So we are going with a much more simplified startup, which I would always preferred, as it would be quicker to cash flow. Yes. When do you think we will be able to build out to full production? And do you have a line on sight for becoming cash flow positive? So that under our previous PEA, we were cash flow positive at 37 million US. I'm very confident that we won't need that certainly for the first stage of production, and I'm confident that that will be cash flow positive, that first stage that we are envisaging. I don't want to get too much more into the numbers until we've done the proper homework, which we'll do when Stuart's got his feet under the table, understands the asset and the country a bit better. we'll sit down with the equipment providers for latest pricing. But I'm assuming that we could hopefully come out within 2 to 3 months with some rougher numbers around that. It won't be a financed set of numbers, but we will have a finance plan around it. Will the new COO bring in some options for funding providers? Yeah, absolutely. Do you think utilising his own network and bridging from his last role with Black Mountain? Yeah, I think absolutely. We've already had a number of chats about that. But he doesn't. Other than the fact that he likes the asset, we both don't know what the real numbers are. As I said, that's going to take us 2 to 3 months before we know what we're effectively selling from a financing point of view. What is the latest thinking on using the port? We're still absolutely keen on using the port. The only issue with it is that we need to dredge it, which is not a big issue. There's a resource sitting in that port, if not construction sand. So we could probably do that for very little cost, if not some return. The issue is it's only got an 8-metre draft, so you can only get up to sort of 10,000 tonne vessels. But they are fine to go to China, to go to India, to go to Europe. So there might be greater economies of scale and some other options. And we are actually talking to 2 logistic providers in Sri Lanka that are doing some work on a feasibility at their cost to see whether we can do better than the port. But the port's sitting there, land and port facilities ready to go. It just doesn't work because it's full of sand. One of my other issues is it going to keep filling up with sand? That's a good and a bad thing. The good thing about this part of the world is your resource just keeps getting replaced by God, by nature. Lanka Minerals have been mining since 1964, I think it is, and they don't do a hell of a lot of exploration. They just keep getting their resource replaced. Great for when you're mining, not necessarily great for when you're operating a port. So that is something we've got to be conscious of. Can you clarify if first phase production is based on concentrate sales without further separation? Yes, that is the intention. So we won't be, the second phase will be a combination of increased capacity and then bringing in magnetic separation. And the final phase, assuming that the resources are in Sri Lanka, that the finances justify, the economic return justifies it, then you'd be looking at the non-magnetic electrostatic separation. But there's a global market for concentrates. If you look at most of the mineral sands producers, most of them export heavy mineral concentrate. Are there any updates on the outstanding 7IML applications? Yes, we're in constant and much more positive, thankfully, dialogue with the GSMB, and we're just going through the process of some of them we're going to shrink, some of them we're going to add new ones on, and we're just in that process with them of working out what's the most logical add-ons. We've moved the initial mining area, so our focus on the next set of industrial mining license applications is in that area. It's just above where we've already got 2 licenses. So we're with 3 or 4 licenses. The plan is we'll have enough for at least 2 years of mining. So I'm not concerned about licenses being a stumbling block for us anymore. Certainly with the current configuration. I mean, I'm on WhatsApp with the chairman of the mines department of the GSMB. Very approachable, as is the director general. When do you think CMET will be able to move on to a better share market board to have a share price more related to the underlying value of the company? That's a great question. Yes, I was. We've looked at ASX, and I think more. There's changes happening. with the senior boards in the UK, which we're obviously open to. Given the conversations we were having, certainly with Sheffield, we didn't feel a need to divert that. But I think it's not the highest thing on my list, but it's certainly something that I think. Who was it? Murray, you're spot on. I have found AIM a little bit frustrating. Just bear with me if I'm missing some, because there's a hell of a lot of questions coming in, which is encouraging, I hope. Could you let us know what studies are needed? I mentioned a bunch of studies before FID, what studies we need. There's things like water monitoring is one of the biggest ones. And one of the water monitoring and hydrology studies, one of the reasons why we're really focusing on that is ultimately we think that this is going to be amenable to dredging. At the moment, we don't. Our EIA doesn't allow us to dredge, but dredging will really bring down the unit costs. And it's been mining below the water table has been allowed in other parts of the country. The independent experts that are working on our EIA for the Southern Block in 199, they're going into it approaching as if we will be able to dredge. So that's a key study for us. And I'll let. I know that Stuart has a bunch of ideas as to what else is required, but finalising the logistics studies is going to be a key one. Just the port work. There's nothing that I feel that could potentially push us beyond those dates. And hopefully I'm not wrong, but Stuart's going to be more of an expert on that than I am. I think there was a related question on the licenses. Are there still licenses that need to be secured? Yes, there always will be. As I think I touched on, this is going to be a rolling project. So we're going to start at about the middle of the project, work our way south, then go back up to the top. And you won't be able to get all the licenses for all of that, because the licenses are effectively subject to getting land access. And it doesn't make sense to lock up 60 kilometres of land access in one go. You can imagine those negotiations. So it'll be a rolling basis, and we've got to make sure that we've got, I think, at minimum 3 years ahead of us, which I'm very confident we will have by the time that we make that financial investment decision. With such a great asset and potential value as BODs, you're considering take further shares? Yes, I am interested in. Will be. I think I'm allowed to say this. I'm very keen to hop into the market. In lieu of salary, I've done it before, but not at this stage. Hopefully, our cash resources are fairly robust at the moment. I don't take a huge salary out of this. I take $180,000. I think everybody would have seen that. So no, I don't intend to take any in lieu of salary in the short period. Sheffield selling? Absolutely not. And I have absolutely no intention to, as Sheffield said, allowed us to say in our release, they continue to be a supportive shareholder, and they remain on the board. And Bruce was there, and he made a quote saying this was about them and not about us. So no, I definitely don't see them going anywhere. And look, it fits with their strategy. Keep a foot on it whilst they fix their own knitting, and then you've got more cards on the table for later on. I can't see any more at the moment. Richard J. I'm not going to answer that question. Actually, well, I better say what it is. Where do you think the share price should be, and how are you going to get it there? Well, I hope you've been listening to the story, and I hope you know, I believe in it. I'm a big supporter of it, and I think it's a great path. I think, you probably expect me to say this, but I think the Sheffield, what Sheffield did is a blessing in disguise. As I said, I continue to wonder why we need to give away 50% of this project to get it funded, when we had a staged approach, and that would have given us maximum leverage. So I am, and certainly if we can increase the resource, you double that resource, that's all for us as a 100% owner of the project. We haven't given away 50% of that upside. So our NPV per share, so the returns to shareholders of the approach we are taking, I am absolutely confident will be higher than what we would have had with Sheffield. What Sheffield provided was an operating partner, supposedly a better balance sheet, and somebody who had done this before. Now, we can build it ourselves. So, people like Stuart have done it before, and we build a team around that. I've done it before in the hard rock space, many, many times right throughout the world. So I'm very confident that stick with us. I know this has been a really painful hit. Tell me about it. I feel as much as you guys. I'm a substantial shareholder and option holder. So it was painful, but you got to pick yourself up and find the best way forward, and that's what we're doing.
Perfect. Greg, I might just jump in and thank you for answering all of those questions for investors. Of course, the company can review all the questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to you and the company, Greg, could I just ask you maybe for a few closing comments?
Yeah. Thanks, Alessandro. Yeah, as I said, what are we doing now? We are going it alone. We are going to double resource. We are going to come back with a very certain plan that is going to be getting us to self-funding as quickly as possible. And if anybody wants to still dance, well, still talk, but it's got to be incredibly compelling. And all of this is being done in the context of a much more supportive environment in Sri Lanka. We're a bit of a standout. I know that there are a lot of the peers here are watching us and encouraging us, and the authorities are giving us absolute support. And it's been a really pleasant change. So stick with us, and yeah, we'll overcome this oversold moment, and I look forward to updating you with new news as in the over the next few months.
Perfect, Greg. Thank you very much for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Capital Metals PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's meeting, and good morning to you all.